Good morning, everybody. This is Stephanie Halko in the State Treasurer's Office. Thanks for joining us today. We'll be happy to answer any questions that you have. And of course, the Treasurer is always willing to discuss anything of interest to you. So I will go ahead and turn it over now to Treasurer Folwell.
Good morning, everyone, and happy post-Easter. Thank you for joining us. I know for some members of the media, it's a light week. Welcome to spring and pollen in North Carolina. So since our last Ask Me Anything call, we've announced that we've expanded our in-house index funds to close to $4 billion, and we're on track for that to exceed $13 billion by the end of the year. In terms of the state health plan, we are excited about some new things that we're doing that I think you've heard about in the past, which is redesigning our card, our health insurance card that goes in our participants' wallet so that we can not just think of them as participants, but to start to get them to help us to be watchdogs. It's interesting about the statistics that are out there in terms of the people who don't know the true value of their health care benefits. Secondly, we're in the process of redesigning our explanation of benefit. It is reported in some circles that over 80% of EOBs have an error on them of some form or another. So we're redesigning our explanation of benefit, and we're truly excited about matching up the fact that our state employees and retirees, who we have a loyalty and duty of care to, will be getting the information. I was thinking about the whole issue of health care over the last few days and came to another conclusion, which adds to the one I've said in the past, which is that we're in a medical arms race. Our participants don't consume health care, it consumes them. And we're about the business of changing that. Next week, we're having a meeting with a roundtable meeting like we do every quarter with our stakeholders who represent different employee groups across North Carolina to talk to them about these matters as well as other matters that we think are important as we try to preserve, strengthen, but also sustain these plans going forward. That's about all the news to report. In our local government commission, or the state and local government commission, we are in the process of issuing $400 million worth of Connect NC bonds. These are bonds that were voter approved, which is something that I've always been in favor of as a public official, voter approved debt. These were the Connect NC bonds. And as you know, when the voters approve those bonds, we just don't issue them all at one time. We issue them in tranches as the priorities and the needs and present themselves in terms of what that money was supposed to go for. Anytime that you're going back into the market with bonds, and this will be almost a $400 million tranche of the $2 billion Connect NC bonds, it's necessary to revisit our relationship with Standard & Poor's, Moody's, and Fitch's. As the keeper of the public purse, one of my major responsibilities is to do everything I can to maintain North Carolina's AAA bond rating, and I intend to try to do that over the next 3 months. So with that, we'll go ahead and open it up for questions.
Sure. Who's got a question for the Treasurer? Go on ahead. Hazel? Yeah, go right ahead, Hazel.
Good morning.
Hey, Hazel.
How is everyone?
Good.
I had a bunch of questions about some things, I think, where we left off on the last call. One was about the CIO search.
Mm-hmm.
You were thinking about whether you're going to use a search firm and when you might be posted.
Nothing has been decided about that, Hazel. We're still in the throes of nothing's changed from what I said at the last Ask Me Anything, that anytime that you've had 7 CIOs in a period of 14 years, that it's very important to me as the treasurer that we get the job description right, and we're still working on that. Obviously, we're very happy with the co-CIOs that are in place, Jeff Smith and Christopher Morris. Jeff has over 26 years of experience inside this building. He has been managing nearly $40 billion of our assets for a very long period of time in our fixed income. Chris Morris has 12 years in the North Carolina retirement system and 10 years previous to that with State Street. So I'm very comfortable, and I can tell you that we're doing postings inside the investment management division for other types of positions, analysts, portfolio managers, and the like, and we're very satisfied at the level of applicants of people who want to come to work here.
Well, and on that note, that I remember several years ago, Treasurer Powell was working with the legislature to try to get more flexibility on job descriptions and salaries. Is that on your list?
It's not on my list. I'm not exactly familiar with what you're saying. The CIO of North Carolina was the highest paid state employee in state government, outside of coaches, of course. But
yes, of course.
Okay. And as far as I know, the CIO doesn't have a shoe contract either. So that's just a little sidebar.
I didn't mean so much for the CIO, but the other staff. She was trying to get flexibility for just hiring limits, not just the money, but also how to hire, who to hire, and what to pay, just for all the investment staff.
We have, it's public record what our investment staff makes. Next to Kevin, there are several people on the investment staff, as you can tell from public record, that make close to $250,000 a year. We have a compensation structure, and since I've been the treasurer, I have not felt any limitations in terms of the process of hiring people in those positions or the amount of money that I can pay them.
Okay.
Yeah, this is Dan Way. I'm wondering, does the fact that we have these tariffs being imposed create any concerns for you, any jitters on your end? How might that affect the state and the pension plans and the state health plan?
Repeat the first three words, Dan, and then Hazel, just want to let you know we'll come back to you if we for the rest of your question. Go ahead, Dan. What's the first three words of your question?
Well, with the tariffs that are being
tariffs, yeah,
and the threat of future tariffs, and all this talk about potential trade wars down the road, does that create any jitters for you? Might there be any practical impact on state revenues and how that would affect the pension plan and the health plan?
Well, I'll go off my mat just a little bit by saying that generally speaking, no one ever wins a war. That doesn't mean wars aren't fought or wars aren't talked about. Number one. Number two, I think it's important, especially with the president and the Congress, that ultimately we and the markets will pay attention to what is done, not what is said. And so my focus is not on what's being said, even though it does rattle the markets, but I'm trying to focus on what's actually being done. I can just report what all the people on this call in this room already know, and that is the president and his advisors are very concerned about the trade deficit of the United States, and they're intending to the best of their ability to do something about it for the long term of the United States of America.
Dan, do you have any follow-ups?
Well, I'm just wondering, might there be any impact though? Is there anything that you could foresee that would, reduce the level of funding that those state plans get?
I don't. Have not been as close enough to give you what I consider to be a credible answer, like I try to do on other things that you asked me about. Obviously, it's something that we're monitoring, but at the end of the day, we still have the custody of one of the 5 best funded pension plans in the United States. We still have a General Assembly that, because of their policies, has has put in one of the strongest rainy day funds in the United States. We have a General Assembly and through the governor's budget who continues to fund the pension plan. And those are the things that I focus on, are those things that are within my control, and I'm still optimistic about that.
Just one more quick question, if I can.
Yeah.
Any update on the ECU and Biden merger? Have you done anything more with that?
I went back to Greenville. Always loved the opportunity to go to Greenville and visited with some of the principals there on the ECU and the Vidant side. And I just reiterated what was told to them by former Treasurer Cowell and also our staff soon after I became the Treasurer of North Carolina. And that is that there are some things that we need that will give us assurance that this merger will not impact the security and safety of bonds that have been previously issued, will not impact and have some clarity about how these nearly 1,100 state employees are going to be dealt with as an employee of this new entity, and also how this merger will impact cost on the state health plan. I don't have the numbers before me. I asked for them a couple of days ago, but I can tell you how much money we spend with UNC Health and how much we spend with Caroline's health system, now Atrium. And we're getting the statistics about how much we spend with ECU Vidant. But at the end of the day, and obviously you can now ask me on this call about Mission Health, because that's in the opposite end of the state. And all these things are very different, but they all have the potential of having a negative impact on the state health plan, the participants, and the taxpayers in North Carolina. So when I was down there in Greenville, we entered into a memorandum, but that memorandum is really no different than the letter that I've been handing them, for almost a year now. These are the things we need, and we expect that they're working to try to get those resolved.
All right, thank you.
Did you want to ask me about Mission Health, or?
Well, you brought it up, so I know that they're entertaining some thoughts about merging too.
Yeah, you had asked me, obviously, about Mission Health when there was a contract dispute between them and Blue Cross Blue Shield, who is not our insurer, but our third-party administrator. And now we have an announcement that they're going to be acquired by HCA. Once again, these are all very different. The Atrium UNC Healthcare deal was, two nonprofits acquiring each other. The ECU Vidant is a nonprofit acquiring a state-owned asset similar to UNC Healthcare, but yet different in terms of how the employees are going to be treated. And now we have Mission Health, which is a nonprofit being acquired by a New York Stock Exchange for-profit company. So all of those things are very interesting. I don't know that that the State Treasurer's Office has a great deal of governance over the Mission Health HCA deal, other than the fact that that entity for decades has been borrowing money through something called the North Carolina Medicare Commission. And the North Carolina Medicare Commission comes before the Local Government Commission, which I chair, in order to get approval to lend money into those by those entities. So I'm always concerned about accessibility and affordability of health care, and that's true whether it's in eastern part of North Carolina, central part of North Carolina, or the western part of North Carolina.
Have you talked with them? Have you asked them for any kind of information?
I have not. I've spoken with the Attorney General, and the reason is that this is more akin to what may have been attempted decade or so ago when Blue Cross Blue Shield tried to convert from a nonprofit to a for-profit. And there is a process and recipe in place that the Attorney General has to follow to determine if those standards have been met or not. So I'm sure the Attorney General is focusing on those parts of the Mission Health deal, but at the end of the day, I have to continue to focus on the affordability and accessibility of health care to our participants in Western North Carolina.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
Hazel, did you have any additional questions?
Just more prosaic ones about the in-house indexing. You said you're on track for quite a bit. So any updates since last month or any schedule for the rest?
No, we are scheduled to have $13 billion in-house by the end of this year. The reason we're doing that is that it's common knowledge that money goes from where it is to where it isn't. And we want to make sure that the transition of this money is done cleanly. And we have to have certainty on our end about when this money is coming over. And of course, the people who the money is coming from have some level of certainty about when the money is leaving them. So nothing new to report there. Go ahead.
Well, that's what I wonder about the money that's leaving. Are they? How are you deciding where to take the money from?
We're staging it and we're doing it proportional. I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but I think that our passive large cap index exposure was somewhere around 25% was with one firm, 75% was with another firm. And I think we're removing that money proportionally.
Between the two firms?
Yes.
Okay, not everybody, not all your managers, just those two?
Correct. For right now, we're obviously exploring other opportunities now that we've sort of, now we have a kitchen and a sink and an oven. So we know how to prepare this stuff now. And, this time last year, we didn't have brokerage accounts. The equity side of the North Carolina retirement system had no brokerage accounts on the equity side. We had brokerage accounts, obviously, on the fixed income side, but none on the equity side. So we've come a long way in a year.
When would you like to be a year from now?
Well, our focus a year from now will probably be on what other types of investing is there is the value in in-house index investing, whether it's domestic or international or some other type of market capitalization. But right now we're just ingesting and digesting the amounts that we've mentioned before.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, does anybody else have any additional questions? Treasurer, do you have any closing remarks?
No, I want to thank you guys for joining us. We have a lot of news popping around North Carolina today, and so we have a list of people who have a high interest in being on the call, but sometimes with the day after the Easter holiday, as well as some other things that are happening, we had a lower participation than normal, but we appreciate the quality of the participants today. And we appreciate you always being here and asking questions. And as you know, our policy here at the Treasurer's Office is not just to be available to you once a month, but any needs that you might have or clarifying amounts of information would be very important. I think that maybe more so for Dan than Hazel, probably in the next few months you're going to hear us report on some things we're doing to make sure that money's not going out of the pension plan to participants that don't deserve it. And but obviously that when we're dealing with issues like that, we're sort of at the beck and call of the judicial system and as well as district attorneys. And but where there's a renewed focus on making sure that we always talk about the investments and lowering fees and assume rates of return and all those other things, but we're also being diligent to ensure that there's not money leaving the pension plan that doesn't belong to to the participant it's going to. So,
Is that a big push this year?
it's not a big push. It's something that we react to. For example, when we get 2 death certificates for one person, where we find out people had been getting money from 2 different plans for decades, and they knew it the whole time. When we find out that a person's money's been going or being wired into a bank account that may have been set up in a maybe a joint tenant kind of way that somehow know that the death policy or the death announcement did not come into our system, and so people are continuing to receive pension checks when they know the person on that account is deceased and using that money accordingly. So I would say that this is not a national story for you, Hazel, but I'm not sure it's not either. I think that all treasurers or whoever manages the pension plans in the respective states that you cover, everybody's reforming these systems, as you can see with what happened in Kentucky. Everybody's trying to figure out how to create alpha. Everybody's dealing with the volatility of the markets. But putting processes in place and getting at the root cause of why we would ever pay money out to people who is not supposed to be the recipient is something that we'll always have to be diligent about. Because we're spending $500 million every 30 days on pension benefits.
And is that going up with the demographics aging, or is it?
Yeah, we're expected for that number. Right now, we're a little over. That's a gross number, obviously, because we get contributions that come in. But right now, we're at a $6 billion we're over approaching $6.5 billion a year in benefits, and that's going to be going to $9 billion over the next 10 years.
Okay. So how does that affect things like your investment strategy?
Well, nothing has happened with our investment strategy or our asset allocation strategy. It's just when you don't have a minimum retirement age in these plans, it puts mathematical pressure on the plan, the likes of which it will be 60 years old this year, the likes of which has never occurred in my lifetime. And you know, anytime that we're trying to talk about these issues, we don't attack people, we attack problems. and we're not trying to hurt anyone. We're trying to be honest about the true condition of this situation. And the fact is that a lot of people have known about this for decades, and they just kick the can down the road. And it always manifests itself at the end of the day with folks like you and Dan and others in terms of how well funded is the pension plan. The reason that these assumed rates returns have not been dropped is that as soon as you drop it, the fundedness of these plans goes down, and no treasurer ever wants to be associated with that. And I'm not one of those.
Is that something you can do as far as the minimum retirement age piece of it?
Minimum retirement age is something that has to be done legislatively, but lowering the assumed rate of return is something that I recommend and will be recommending in a few weeks to our retirement board.
Okay. And what number are you recommending?
7.
Okay.
But we're doing it in Hazel, we're different here. About a third of our assets are what we call the ELGers, local government employees retirement system. And so anytime that we do that, we're doing it in conjunction with our strong relationship with the North Carolina County Commissioners Association and the League of Municipalities. And because anytime that we lower this assumed rate of return, the employer contribution has to go up. So we're trying to smooth this out to keep it. The chart that I saw when I got sworn in as treasurer is nothing short of violent in terms of where the contribution rates are going to be going over the next 15 years. So we're trying to smooth all that out to give cities, counties, as well as the state more certainty about what these costs are.
Well, but you will have to raise it.
Sorry?
But you will have to raise it if you lower the assumed rate of return.
Yeah, we will be raising it, but we're trying to smooth out the funding of that over 5 years.
5 years, okay.
Well, I mean, don't quote me on that because my actuary is not
Sure.
sitting here, and I just want to make sure I'm saying.
Okay.
But
I'm not writing anything.
but there's we're doing it in concert with approved actuarial standards and processes.
Okay. And you know what, if you have another minute, I wanted to ask you about the fiduciary rule, which the Department of Labor's rule. It's not a public issue, it's for private pensions, but some state insurance commissioners are figuring out if they want to get involved. Is that anything that would be on your radar?
I think about that word all the time, but I just think about it in conjunction with our loyalty and duty of care to our participants. And I know there's a lot of news stories about this rule, how it relates to insurance commissioners. There's a lot of stuff coming out of the State Treasurers Association, State Financial Officers Association, and there's a lot of lobbying going on a lot of those topics, and it's not something that I'm quite up to speed on. And generally, I get up to, I try to be forward thinking and have clarity of thought and put things in the right sequence, but on some issues like this, I let it come to me.
Okay. Well, and I remember at the last state treasurers meeting here in Washington, the big topic was infrastructure. Like if there's going to be any money to invest in it.
Yeah.
Is that on your radar?
Yes, I'm also the chair of the Debt Affordability Study. Excuse me. I'm the chair of the Debt Affordability Commission, which every year has to release the debt affordability study to the General Assembly and the governor by February 1st of every year. And there's a couple things floating in North Carolina, one having to do with transportation, the other one had to do with building of public schools. Obviously, anything of that nature it had to be voter approved, because that's how I feel that debt should be, as how I feel like it should be handled. That anytime that you encumber someone or are asking them to pay something, you need to get their vote on it. And that's something I strongly believe in, whether no matter what, if it's for infrastructure under the ground that we can't see, roads or public school buildings.
But is it something you see the pension fund being able to invest more of, or wanting to invest more in infrastructure?
I think that I'll let our asset allocation, and as well as our directors and co-CIOs and investment professionals deal with that. You obviously have reported on some state treasurers who use pension plans for things like this. My approach is to always come back to: am I being loyalty? Am I being loyal? And am I exercising a duty of care? And does this bring value to our participants with a margin of safety? And
well, like Virginia, I think they've done quite a bit of direct investing or co-investing in infrastructure. I don't think. Do you think that was a political decision, or they just wanted to do more direct investing?
I'm not sure. People do things for their reasons, not mine. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure why they did that.
Okay.
Treasurer Folwell, do you expect to be doing anything legislatively in the short session with raising that minimum age for retirement?
Well, the answer to your question is right now we're working on our legislative agenda and we're sort of breaking it down into the technical parts of it, and that's something that we're focused on at this time, and so that's where our focus is, and obviously we can't do anything in the short session that short sessions, as I hear, is going to be short. So, but we've all heard that before.
Yeah. Well, so what is the timeline for getting the assumed rate of return lowered? Is that a month or a year or?
Oh, that's this month. That's not legislative. That's just for our board of trustees.
For your board, but
Yeah.
then it's done, or do you have to get legislation?
It's done.
And then it's done. Okay, great.
Yeah, we lowered it from 7.25 to 7.2 last year, and now we're attempting to go ahead and lower it to 7% this year. But we're figuring out a funding, an actuarially sound funding model that makes sense for all those stakeholders.
But when do you think you'd be announcing that?
I don't have it off the tip of my tongue, but the teasers and Elders Board of Trustees meeting is coming up soon at the end of this month, I think, and so that's when we'll be announcing it. Yeah.
Okay, great.
But unlike the other ones you report on, Hazel and Dan, a lot of people put out these verbose press releases about them lowering the assumed rate of return, but they weren't funding their plans anyway.
Yeah.
We're not only going to lower our assumed rate of return, but we're going to have a plan on how to fund it.
That's great. Yeah. All right. Thank you.
One last question on the bond tranche that you're going to be, the $400 million.
Yeah.
Can you tell me what that's going to be directed towards?
Stephanie will get with our local director of our local government commission and hopefully have an answer for you on that in the next 2 hours. I think what she'll be reporting back to you is a list of projects, maybe by category. So, community colleges are going to get this amount, universities are going to get this amount, the parks are going to get this amount. Does this mean that it will be broken out by project? Where Hanging Rock State Park's getting a new visitor center or something along those lines. I'm not sure, but at least we'll be able to get them to you in the next couple of hours in terms of category. And I think it's a great question, Dan, and I think it's reportable. But let me tell you why. It's important for the voters who have approved $2 billion in debt to understand that we're carrying through on what we asked them for permission to do. Number two, it's reportable, I believe, to talk about what the budgets and the expectations were for the first $200 million that we spent. How's it doing? How's it going? Did projects come in less than expected? Are there cost overruns or shortages? And then also it's reportable because it's important that at least some of your readers may have an interest in buying these bonds in the market because they are, double tax exempt, both for state and federal income taxes. So they may be interested both as a citizen and as an investor. So that's why I think it's an important story.
All right. Well, thanks. I look forward to getting that. And
Yep, I'll get back to you with that today, Dan.
super.
Thank you, guys and girls.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks everybody. We look forward to talking to you next month.